Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. As always, I'm Amber Duke, joined again at the desk by Niall Stanage.
Great to see you, Amber. Always a Friday treat to have these conversations with you.
Absolutely. Let's jump right into it. The world is reacting to President Trump's Liberation Day tariff extravaganza.
China, for instance, has already retaliated. That country said it would be imposing 34% tariffs on all US imports.
Then, China's Ministry of Commerce said it would effectively ban 11 American companies from doing business in China at all.
And then, of course, we have the markets. The Dow Jones dropped almost 1,700 points, or 4%. The S&P 500 dropped 274 points, which is about 4.8%. And the Nasdaq tanked 1,050 points, which is nearly 6%.
Here's President Trump during a gaggle yesterday.
It's to be expected. This is a patient that was very sick. We really inherited a terrible economy, as you know, with a lot of problems. It was a sick patient. It went through an operation on Liberation Day, and it's going to be a booming country. A very booming country. It's going to be amazing, actually.
And then there's the response in Congress. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa and Democratic Senator Maria Cantwell of Washington introduced legislation to limit Trump's tariff power. This would mean that the president would have to give Congress a 48-hour notice before imposing tariffs, and Congress would then have to approve the measure within 60 days. In another instance earlier this week, 4 Republicans joined Senate Democrats in a vote to block Trump's tariffs on Canada. That measure passed in a 51-48 vote. Cantwell said in a statement, "Arbitrary tariffs, particularly on our allies, damage US export opportunities and raise prices for American consumers and businesses. As representatives of the American people, Congress has a duty to stop actions that will cause them harm."
Not everyone is all doom and gloom over Trump's tariffs, however. When Trump imposed tariffs on automobiles and light trucks in late March, the United Auto Workers president, Shawn Fain, said, "We applaud the Trump administration for stepping up to end the free trade disaster that has devastated working-class communities for decades. Ending the race to the bottom in the auto industry starts with fixing our broken trade deals, and the Trump administration has made history with today's actions." It's notable that Fain has been a staunch anti-Trump critic. Ethan Lane of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association said in a statement on April 2nd, "For too long, America's family farmers and ranchers have been mistreated by certain trading partners around the world. President Trump is taking action to address numerous trade barriers that prevent consumers overseas from enjoying high-quality, wholesome American beef."
Meanwhile, businessman Mark Cuban has some advice for the current moment. He wrote on Blue Sky, "It's not a bad idea to go to the local Walmart or big box retailer and buy lots of consumables now. From toothpaste to soap, anything you can find storage space for, buy before they have to replenish inventory. Even if it's made in the USA, they will jack up the price and blame it on tariffs." So I think we'll probably get off to a vigorously disagreeing start here, Amber. It seems to me that this is a very clear example of a cause and effect that has hit the markets very badly. President Trump introduces these tariffs, the bottom falls out of the market, between $2 and $3 trillion of value in the stock market wiped out in one day. As we are talking right now on Friday morning, the markets have declined further. I think that firstly, that calls into question the wisdom of the policy in a very serious way. Secondly, it hurts around 160 million Americans who are invested in the stock market, in either directly or indirectly through 401ks. And thirdly, I think the attitude, particularly from more conservative-leaning media to it, has been pretty absurd. I mean, one can only imagine if former President Biden or former President Obama did something like this and there was that amount of value evaporated from the stock market. I don't think some of the people making excuses for President Trump would be making excuses for them.
I don't think it's necessarily an excuse so much as a recognition that perhaps a temporary stock market crash or dip, if whatever you want to call it, is necessary to addressing these trade imbalances and really bringing back the American working middle class. Over the past 3 decades, we have seen trade imbalances around the world increase rather significantly, not least of which because we decided to recognize China as a favorable nation through our trade policy, and the manufacturing base in the United States has been wiped out through those policies. We have a massive group of people who either don't have the skills or education or frankly shouldn't have to do that in order to participate in which has largely become a service economy because we no longer make products here in the United States of America. And so the tariffs are addressing a larger symptomatic problem of the American economy's lack of robust health that I think it's a bit myopic to only look at the stock market as an indicator of how much of a positive impact this will have on the American people.
So, first of all, in relation to the hollowing out of American manufacturing, that is obviously a problem, and it has obviously hurt people in a pretty profound way. And if you, I can't remember now where in the US you're originally from, but if you...
Western Maryland.
Western Maryland, okay. So if you travel further out and further into the Midwest and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Indiana, Ohio, there are obviously communities that have been very hard hit by that hollowing out of manufacturing. Now, the question is this policy going to bring those back? Or is there, firstly, automation is part of that picture as well in terms of the hollowing out of American manufacturing. Whether the reliance on service industries means the American economy is unhealthy, I think, is highly questionable. But there's also this division in the policy that Trump is pursuing right now, where is he going to keep these tariffs in effect for long enough to regenerate American manufacturing in a serious way, because it takes time, obviously, to build new factories and all the rest of it? Or is this a negotiating position? We mentioned in our introduction, among people defending Trump, the Cattlemen's Association or whatever. I noticed in their press release, they talk about the fact that there are unfair tariffs. There's a country, the name now escapes me who it is, who tariffs American beef but not Australian beef, and the cattlemen are outraged about that. Perhaps they should be outraged about that, but that is something that can be fixed in negotiation pretty quickly and is a separate push from the longer term massive tariffs to boost American manufacturing.
Yeah, and Howard Lutnick has talked about this. He has said that countries have to make concessions if they want tariff relief. I think there's certain cases where it makes sense, where if a country decides to get their tariffs on U.S. exports down to zero, the president would respond in kind. China, I view as a separate category because there are a lot of other geopolitical factors at play there in terms of them stealing intellectual property, artificially deflating their currency, really engaging in really scammy ways on the market that are impacting Americans regardless of whether or not they have tariffs or reciprocal tariffs in response. I think in regards to the EU, Canada, Mexico, there's probably certain deals that could be made that would cause Trump to bring tariffs down a bit. But I do believe overall, if you listen to people like Robert Lighthizer, Peter Navarro, even if you go back to the 90s and listen to Pat Buchanan, this has to be a longer-term strategy to try to reshore American manufacturing, and not just for economic reasons, but for national security reasons. During World War II, America was able to quickly ramp up production during the war in order to create weaponry, to build tanks, to build planes, to outfit our troops with the best possible goods. We are in a situation now where if, God forbid, America were involved in a war, or if we had to stave off a war, we are reliant on countries that could potentially be enemies of ours in a war to provide products like steel, timber, batteries, microchips that we can't produce here. And we saw this during the pandemic in 2020. China was hoarding PPE and refusing to give it to countries unless they paid a steep bill in order to get those products, pharmaceuticals as well. So reshoring manufacturing is both great for the economic health of the middle class and also a national security imperative.
So I think two things. One is the American people, are the American people, I should say, willing to bear this amount of pain where there is about half the population invested in the stock market losing money right now? Are they willing to bear that pain for the resurgence of manufacturing if it happens? Just briefly, because I think it can be easy to get into the generalities of this. I looked up one of the countries tariffs are being imposed on, which is Bangladesh. 37% tariff on Bangladesh. Bangladesh is mainly an exporter of garments to the United States. The average monthly wage in Bangladesh is $213. The average wage in the United States is about $5,500 gross. I don't see any way that tariffs, unless they are just astronomical, can redress that difference. And in the meantime, Americans are going to be paying more for their T-shirts.
I think it's fair to say that there are some industries that it doesn't make sense to reshore to America, and there are others that do, and particularly things like automobile manufacturing. Americans make great cars, but they're more expensive. because we expect that American workers get paid a decent wage, that they have labor protections. A lot of these workers are in unions like the UAW, and that should be how we treat our workers. And unfortunately, a lot of companies have decided against the national interest that they are going to use cheaper labor abroad in order to cut down Americans' wages because they value a cheaper car over making sure that we have a robust and healthy middle class. And
but a lot of Americans value buying a cheaper car rather than necessarily supporting American manufacturers.
They do, and I think they're wrong.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, one of the things where I think we might have some disagreement is that income inequality has become an increasing problem in American society. This is something that a lot of really aggressive free market people will say is no big deal because the economy's not a zero-sum game, right? When the rich get richer, then everybody else comes up with them. A rising tide lifts all boats. But that's not the case with the way that our current trade imbalance works, because the money that we're spending on all of these goods that are produced by these wealthy people is either going to the wealthy people or being exported to other countries. Those dollars aren't staying in America. So that's not a sustainable way of running an economy, in my opinion. And there are basically two ways that you can address that income inequality, which leads to all kinds of societal ills and disunity and discordance. One is to tax the rich and redistribute the money to the lower classes. The other is to have a mass tariff policy and try to make sure that these people have productive, meaningful work. And I would view the latter as a healthier, more productive way to run an economy.
And of course, I would view the former as a more healthy, but you knew that anyway. We have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising right after this. Stay with us.